At any point, if you guys feel like you can't hear me, or if you need me to slow down, just say, slow down, okay? Because I tend to speak a little bit fast, so I always have to kind of check myself. When I left LA, I also got sick, and I was in Warsaw, kind of walking around all sick and congested. I'm pretty much over it, but I'm still a little bit kind of have a sore throat a little bit here and there. So like I said, I might clear my throat a little bit also. Again, welcome. Thank you for having me here. I appreciate everyone coming from different parts of the world to join Promised Land and me to listen to what I'm going to talk about today. Now, the label of the lecture does say dynamic process, but it's focusing more on the 2D side of sketching and drawing in the entertainment industry. Just to give you a bit of background as to who I am, and I'm not going to spend too much time on this because I want to focus on the actual process of what I do. I went to a school out in Los Angeles called the Art Center College of Design in Pasadena, California. I was there from 2001 to 2004 studying entertainment design and illustration. After I graduated, started working in video games, concept art. Did that for 7 years in multiple different studios in-house. Left in 2013, started doing my own thing, freelancing, contract work, multiple different industries. And I've worked in illustration, fashion, product design, and entertainment. I've used this process to help me adapt and also apply to problem solve in every one of those fields. Now, for me, I was always more of a draftsman when I was a student at Art Center. I wasn't much of a painter. I loved doing it, but my strength and focus was always on drawing. Now, some people like to ask, like, how long have you been drawing? Well, I've been drawing since I was 5 years old, okay? The very first memory that I have as a human being is of drawing. I was introduced to sketching by my grandfather when I was 5 years old. Little birds. I still remember that. It's the first memory that I have. To that day, I've sketched literally every day of my life, okay? And there was nobody ever there to tell me, don't do that. You should focus on this or focus on that. Everyone was always encouraging me to continue what I wanted to do. So I was set up to succeed in the fact that I have all these people from family, friends, instructors, and mentors to continue the path that I wanted to choose. So hopefully all of you guys are having that kind of opportunity yourself in the location you're at, and you will find your way down that path. So the dynamic sketching process, what is that? Where does it come from? It comes from the Art Center College of Design, which is where I teach now, currently. So I started teaching there in 2010. I've been teaching 7 years now, all right? I teach at multiple different schools. I want to start off with a quote. It says here, see with intent and awareness. Visualize through simplicity. Express without effort. And this is an echo from Norm Sherman. Now, you guys might wonder, who is this Norm Sherman? He was my instructor and my mentor at the Art Center College of Design. He used not these specific words. He only put up on a chalkboard, see, visualize, and express. That's all he put up. But those words, to me as a student, stuck. And I use this formula in a process in how I can problem solve, design problems, or even just sketching and drawing problems too, observationally or from imagination. So hopefully you guys can try to find out how this adapts to your process as well. You have to understand that even though I might talk about how this applies to entertainment, this has multiple different applications. My students at the Art Center College, I teach in the product design department, they're industrial design students, entertainment, illustration, and they use storytelling. So this skill set is not about just corralling you into one specific industry. It's applicable to any industry that requires you to then visualize and communicate through a two-dimensional form, all right? Here's a quick bullet point as to what we are going to talk about today. The origin of dynamic sketching. Where does it come from? I'm going to talk about Norm a little bit more too, from the Art Center College of Design. The fundamentals and practice, the things that we actually do to build our muscle memory, right? Getting that repetition in place. Learning from observation. My class is all about observation. Why is that important? How do I do it every day? How do I keep up that discipline? And how does it work into my working professional field? Building the visual library. I'm sure some of you guys may have heard this before, right? Understanding how to building your memory to collect all that information as possible. And how do you retain that? How do you even build it? So we'll talk about that as well. Application to the industry. Well, you draw every day, you observe, but how does that then work in the industry? Where does it go? And how have I used it? I hope you guys will start to realize as I continue to talk that much of the things I am going into is from my perspective and my experience. No matter what I say, you have to understand that this is not a dogma. I'm not telling you that you can draw this one way and you have to draw this way, okay? You can visualize and you can experience things in so many different fashions, and it's all about how you then package it and how you then problem solve, right? So please look at it that way, where this is just from one perspective. This is a skill set that you can use to question, to break down, and then apply. So when I teach the classes, I sit there and I tell them, listen to what I have to say, attempt it to the best of your ability. From there, question it. If you are in classes in schools right now, you're not questioning your instructors, you should be. Ask them questions. How should I do this? Why should I do that? Have them question things as well. Start a conversation. Start to understand where you then fit inside that puzzle. This is where you can find me currently. My main platform that I use in social media is Instagram. So if you guys do want to check out what I do, that is the best place to find me. These are some of the schools I teach at currently, right now. So the Art Center in Pasadena, Concept Design Academy, which is also based in Los Angeles. The second school, CDA, is a school that I have a lot of international people come through in the summer. So I've had students from all over the world, again, locally, right in the classroom. Two online approaches. I have CGMA, is a school I've been teaching at for over 8 years. SVS Learn is a brand new one that I just started with, and that's with the Jake Parker group. So these are just a few of the areas you can find me at. This is Norm. Okay, this was my teacher and instructor. As you can notice, he's pretty amazing in terms of what he can do on the chalkboard. This is something I took up on myself as well, too. I was introduced to this class in 2002. I was 22 years old at the time. I may look young. I walk into a classroom and I sit down and my students will be like, when's the teacher coming in? It's like, oh, I'm the teacher. I'm actually 36 years old, okay, 36. I started this class at 22 and I've been drawing in this method for a very long time. So all the things I'm going to show you guys, please don't have any expectation that you are able to all of a sudden perfectly match to what I'm doing. It takes a moment to really absorb, and I'm sure you all realize that. I'm just going to show you a few slides and images of things that we've captured over the years from his class. And again, he used the chalkboard to communicate a lot of his process and how he broke down shapes. The class was about observation and breakdown, looking at things from organic to mechanical, hard surface, industrial, architectural, doesn't matter. The source of the information comes from product design, industrial design, and architectural design, but it was then fashioned and reapplied to entertainment. Norm was the one that first started that. He'd been teaching the class for decades. What I loved about the class was that he was so interested in a lot of the things that I was interested in. Organics of marine life, insect forms, entomology, cars, and military history. And that's what we did. We went into the classroom, we went to the locations, and we actually saw the real things and drew from them. So it was the experience of being there that really helped us be engaged with what he was trying to tell us. So I started it up. 2010 is when I started teaching it, continued what he was doing. So this is some of the processes on the chalkboard in terms of practicing. Now, just to give you a bit of the background as to how the classroom is set up, and you guys are welcome to try this on your own if you want to. In the class, if you guys were in my class right now, this is what would be happening. There would be a blank chalkboard, and I would say, you come on up and draw me something. I would say, draw this, draw that, and draw that. You have 5 minutes. Start of the class. No introduction, nothing. It's just to even the playing field, to say, all of you guys can draw. You can communicate. But it's more about how are you seeing it. This is actually not a class about drawing. You're going to draw anyways, no matter what. You're going to. But what this class is to train your eyes to see something very specifically. Can you understand the shape language of an object that you are seeing in front of you to be able to retain that information and apply it into design afterwards, whatever industry you're getting into? Again, stuff that I would draw up there, we go to different locations like air museums. And again, we go to these actual places and look at them. We learn about them. And I show my entire process on a chalkboard. Step by step repetitions, showing what the simplest shape I can find, using simple approaches. Now, many people are always so focused on the end result, okay? I don't care what the end result is. I am more interested in how do you begin. What is the first thing you see? What is the first mindset that you have? And what is your intent and goal with whatever you're working on, whether it's just a sketch or a complete finished design? What is your intent? Why are you doing it? How are you doing it? Are you asking enough questions? Yeah? So this is one of the classrooms I also teach. This is at the CDA, Concept Design Academy. And I teach 2 classes, and this is going to focus on dynamic sketching, but I also do teach a class called Form Language, which is the next steps of once we understand how to break down the elements of shapes from observation, how do we then use it in an application to design? So hopefully all of you guys, and I'm sure, and I'm assuming all of you are interested in entertainment design with whatever direction you're trying to get into, you'll take these similar steps. Now, some of you may feel like I'm not really getting a lot of this information, you know, whether it's a certain school you're going to, but trust me, this day and age, the advantage you have is that information is so easily accessible online, okay? This is the advantage you have today compared to what me and many of these speakers didn't have, you know, 15 years ago. So take advantage of it, but also be aware of the pros and the cons. Again, constantly ask questions. Don't just retain it and just don't accept it as truth. Always think about where it goes. More of the classrooms, just kind of showing feedback processes, what we get into. I'm going to continue talking about the lecture. If we have enough time at the end, what I would love to do is actually do a drawing demo as well. I'll try to keep track of the time. And if we don't get to a point of time of demoing, maybe I can even do it at the Meet the Artist section, okay? Let me show you something real quickly. This is not a blank slide. Just to give you a little bit more breakdown, here's a little video. You can go watch this real quickly. No matter how great that piece looks on the chalkboard, eventually, no matter what, you gotta erase it. This was produced in 2009 or 10. It's a very difficult transition. As students, we're drawing on the page, and the motions are small because you're using your finger and your hands, your arm movement. Transitioning to the chalkboard is a completely different motion because you're using your whole body. And it really is like a workout, you know? You're going from arm movements to foot placement and using your back and chest and everything, actually. And it's pretty labor-intensive a lot of times. And it was the motion more than anything that was the hardest thing to really... Oh, sorry about that. I was trying to increase the volume, but we'll keep it going. Capture. Also in the fact that with paper, you're using either a white paper or a toned paper, and you're going darker in value, which means you're going blacker. On the chalkboard, it's already black, and so you're working the opposite way. You're bringing your highlights to the front. It's always about the biggest shape to the smallest shape. It's about the big picture, not about the small details. Whenever we see something, whether it's a car or a military vehicle or a human being, when somebody first starts to draw, what they see is the details. Oh, I want to be able to draw the eye or the mouth perfectly, or the details of this vehicle perfectly. And it's not about those details initially, because that's at the end. It's always about that first step is, what is the biggest shape that you see? And that could be the most basic of shapes, a box, a circle, you know, a cylinder, whatever it may be. And I always follow that same rule with whatever I draw. It all started with Norm, really. He was the one that everybody knew that's what he did, drawing on a chalkboard and communicating that process of drawing. And a lot of other drawing classes, you know, are usually done through demos on paper or large sheets of paper doing figure drawings and such. However, the kind of class that I teach, it's called dynamic sketching. So it's always about the interpretation of really simple shapes. And the reason why we do it on the chalkboard is because we go through so many drawings and we draw so fast, we got to be able to erase it. And so we want to be able to just show that process with that speed and how fast we can kind of interpret shapes. Because I enjoy the process more than the finish, I can erase it, I can let go of it. And that's what I try to teach a lot of my students too, is the fact that, you know, let go of it. When you can let go of it, you're actually giving yourself and focus all to that drawing or piece that you're working on. When you're too limited by how you think about your pieces, then the pieces feel limited and stiff as well. The teaching, you know, the personal work, all the conceptual design work that I do for gaming and films, it kind of rounds me out and makes me understand that I wasn't going to school to be a entertainment designer. I was going there to be a thinker. I was going there to be a problem solver. And that's how I label myself. A lot of people ask, are you an artist? I don't consider myself an artist at all. I don't see myself as an artist. I see myself as a designer. I'm a designer that works in anything and everything that requires problem solving. And if I can draw it, and if I can see it, and if I understand it, I mean, I can do it. So that was a really quick video that was put together because I actually did a Kickstarter for a book that actually focused on my chalk drawings. So that's why that video was focusing mostly on the chalk. It had a little bit of information about the classroom as well, but I just wanted to kind of share that with you guys. And I apologize that the volume was a little bit low, so you can find it online on Vimeo and have access to it later on. So we're going to talk about a few of the fundamentals about the actual class, getting into the mileage, the beginning of building your muscle memory. So the stuff on the chalkboard, I just wanted to show it to you guys. But I'm going to show you guys a few pages that has a little bit more detail and information, all right? And we'll kind of stop for a second and get into it. What you're seeing up here right now are essentially my lecture notes. I spent about 6 months in 2015, 16, to essentially put down all my information, note-taking processes, how to draw, on sketchbooks. I spent a good amount of time getting as much information as possible. And the only reason I did it was because after teaching for so many years, I kind of looked at my students and I asked, do you guys even know what the hell I'm talking about? You know, I put it up on the chalkboard and people just kind of nod their head and they'll attempt it. So I had to see it for myself. I had to actually put it on a sketchbook and refine it or add to it or take away from it to build on top of what Norm had established. So it starts off as simple as this. Now, there's, again, a lot of information up there real quickly. Some of it is very basics and things that you should already understand, going into things like the perspective, the combination of shape and form. And the class also requires all the students that I have to only use felt tip pens. Now, like I stated earlier, if it was this classroom right now and I asked you guys to go draw on the chalkboard and stuff like that, when we actually begin, I restrict and limit the tools. You are only allowed to use felt tip pens. No pencil, no ballpoint. There is a reason for this in terms of why I teach it that way. Because this class is all about making mistakes, okay? And you got to be able to understand and how to actually absorb and accept your mistakes and move forward. Now, it starts in the very beginning of just using a line, using a shape, to just build that muscle memory and also get familiar with a tool like a felt tip pen. And it's scary. You got a blank sheet of paper and a felt tip pen. The first line you make to the very last line you make has to be very well thought out. The intention has to be there. The strategy in terms of how you approach the drawing has to be there. So it starts off with a lot of repetitive movement, building muscle memory. So we start off with things like just line control, repetition of lines over and over and over again, from lines, arcs, waves, zigzags. Now, many of the things that I'm showing you right now are the side of tedium. Yeah, it's very tedious, very monotonous, very boring, but I tell most of my students the stuff you're seeing for the first few slides here are the most crucial, but they are boring, right? This stuff I used to practice day in, day out. Even if it's doing 5-10 minutes a day was enough. But the very act of just warming up through form, line, was something that really helped build my muscle memory and control of the pen, to get pressure control, to get movement and speed, to get my pacing right. So it really just takes that kind of commitment to sit there and do it over and over and over again. I love this quote from Bruce Lee way back in the day. He said, you don't fear the man that practices 10,000 moves, one time. You fear the man that practices one move 10,000 times, yeah? So it's that confidence to build that one skill set that you have, so anytime you're on the moment, you can just bring it out and do it. There's no more thinking. We then go from lines to boxes in the perspective, going into elliptical shapes. Now, drawing circles and ellipses is impossible freehand, perfectly. But it wasn't about that. It was about the idea of building confidence, right? Getting the motion correct, getting your speed and pacing up to level. So we don't use rulers. We don't use ellipse guides. Everything is freehand to be able to eye your information and accurately draw it. So we would do lines, ellipses, breakdown of forms into the organic shapes. Now, you saw the perspective boxes in the previous ones. Again, you guys should understand your basics in perspective. 1 point, 2 point. You should understand what the cone of vision is. You should be able to construct, space and depth using form. But from there, in the classroom, we're focusing on individual subject matter. So it wasn't about composing scenes or landscapes. It was always about observing the singular object in front of you. And we cover many things. The first half of the class, we go into organic shape language. So animals, bone structure, insects, marine life, and we cover all those things. And I show my breakdown and approach to all that stuff. We then transition and switch to hard surface. We go into cars, tanks, military machines, airplanes. And what that shows is that to me, drawing an airplane or drawing a giraffe is no different to me, because I don't see those things. What I see in front of me right now are not people, but blocks of shapes, okay? It's one of those things where you train yourself so much to it becomes subconscious. It's just something that happens immediately. It's the same idea if you're a filmmaker and you study filmmaking, editing, camera shots, all that stuff, pacing, and you watch a film, you can't help but just break it down, right? You notice those things. So in this method, the more and more you train your eye and mindset, it becomes natural. It becomes immediate, trust me. So the form language side, we start with just the idea of playing with shape of organics. So even just taking an ellipse, contorting it, stretching it, twisting it, pulling it, and adding three-dimensional elements of shape. So we would use things like a wireframe, right? I call that a contour line to show the curvature, the three-dimensionality of that information of shape. So this information you're seeing up here is all collected inside of a book. It's up here. I call the Dynamic Bible. This is all my lecture notes inside this book. I have 2 copies here, and I stated earlier before everybody came in that I will be raffling 2 of these off at the end of the presentation and at the Meet the Artist section. So if you guys want to try to get a copy, that would be a good opportunity to do so. So again, very primitive, very basic, but very important. Something that you need to practice nonstop. And I get a question like this: how many hours should I practice in a day to draw? Well, here's my answer to that. You could spend 10 hours every day, 7 days a week to draw for 10 hours, and you will get better, naturally, because you're just putting that much effort into it. Here is the problem with that approach. I've done it. If you're investing that many hours per day to do it, what's going to happen? You burn out, yeah? You burn out, and all of a sudden you're like, I don't even want to do this anymore. And what happens? A week goes by, 2 weeks go by, and all that mileage that you've built up erodes, it disappears. So it's like starting over again. The idea is not about the commitment of time, it's the mindset. Are you thinking of doing it every single day? I don't care if it's 10 hours or half an hour. Are you doing it every day? That's more important. So don't kill yourself, but discipline yourself to train to do it nonstop. I wake up and sleep thinking drawing, okay? It's my entire life. That's all I do. It is who I am. So it has to be that kind of secondary nature, because as hard as I push, there are guys out there that push even harder than I do. You know, I mean, there are guys that can draw and paint 10 times better than I can. But that's okay. I'm confident in what I can do. I appreciate the fact that other people are doing amazing. It gives me a goal sight, yeah? The reason I teach is because I want you guys to draw better than me. I want you to be better than me, because if I can train you to be elevated higher than I am, that's going to force me to be better than you, okay? So you're constantly trying to up the bar. It's never, I'm good enough. Nobody ever says that, right? From shape language of contour, three-dimensional shapes, we think about outer information to inner details, volume, information from outside to inside. So this also then goes into penmanship, our ability to create clarity in information and details through hatching, through darks and lights, finding areas of focus, controlling where we put our details, how much we put in there, and how much not to. The idea is this: in the class, if you were on location with me, if we went to a museum to go draw, you were walking with me to go, let's say, a zoo, right? And we were looking at animals. Well, you don't have time to sit there to draw for 45 minutes. You got 5 minutes. What can you give me? What are your priorities? How are you able to then structure it out? And can you communicate quickly with accuracy? It's tough, yeah? I'm sure if I give you guys a photograph of a lion and I said draw it, and I give you all the time in the world, all of you guys could probably draw a very good lion. But if we went to a zoo and saw a lion and I said, you have 5 minutes, what can you do, yeah? Sometimes in the industry, it's like that. We need an idea right now. Give us something. You got half an hour. Give us some concepts. It happens. Whether you're doing it in 3D or in 2D, doesn't matter. The idea that you can produce and visualize content. So this goes into more of the detailing aspects, surface information. Learning from observation. So a lot of that stuff prior was just some of the fundamentals. Now, this is really part of the meats of the thing. Again, I take my classes on location everywhere. Now, here is the importance of observation and drawing. Some of you may do it. Some of you be like, I don't have time to. I just want to sit at my computer. It's more comfortable. Very true. Absolutely. Here's the thing. The reason why I favor observational drawing, and I'm not saying drawing from reference is something I don't do. I do it all the time. There are things that I can't see, right? But here's the benefit of being on location. It helps you retain your memory because it's the experience of being there that helps build that. It's not just the visual of me seeing this space shuttle. It's actually going there and seeing the actual size, being able to see the materials, talk to the people that have worked on this thing, see the people that actually walk around, right? The sights, the smells, the interactions, the tactileness of it. That helps me retain my information when I'm drawing something. I know where I was sitting. I know how I felt when I did this sketch. I still have sketches I did 10 years ago where I knew how I felt, what the weather was like, all that stuff. It's still there. So observational drawing really builds that level of understanding and confidence because, again, it's an experience, not just something where you copy. And that is a big problem when you draw from a photograph. You are copying something. So through copy, you are not absorbing it. It's just, one ear out the other kind of thing, right? It's you just motioning your hand. So you don't really absorb that and break it down for yourself to apply later on. So just a few images where we always go on location somewhere. And I'm demoing constantly for a lot of my students, nonstop. And many of the things that I draw, I've drawn so many times, it just becomes, again, repetitive. Drawing to me is like talking. It's just as quick. It takes less of an effort because I already understand where everything goes. Let me answer a couple questions for you guys, too, that I get from a lot of students. How do you get so fast? A sketch like this takes me 20 minutes or less. Okay? People ask me, how do you get so quick? Well, I have an answer to speed. The answer to speed is being familiar. Familiarity is the answer because when you understand what you are drawing, there is less hesitation, there's less thinking, and deciding of what to do. You already know what to draw. Then you just produce it, right? So that amount of repetition is required. Is there a trick or a shortcut, a way around it? No. It just requires you to draw it that many times. Observation. A lot of these sketches are all on site, beginning to end. Most of them will be 20 minutes or less. Again, the reason why I'm doing this is because I'm studying, I'm trying to retain information, but also, I hope that you guys will then understand that you just have to do it because it's fun, right? You're all doing this because you're here because it's fun, yeah? You're all drawing and you're all creating things because that's something you've been doing your entire life. And this is something I've been doing my entire life. Even if I was, not working, if I wasn't making money, if I was homeless on the street, I would still be doing this, yeah? All observation, constantly recording information. So eventually, what happens is that even if you're not drawing, your brain is still in that mode to break things down. You're always searching for something, even subconsciously. And I'm always just like a sponge, absorbing stuff. So even this show, I've just been walking around, interacting with people, seeing the environment. I'm absorbing everything, okay, like a sponge. So anywhere I go, I'm curious about stuff. I don't get bored anywhere. I can be at a cafe, at a restaurant, here, or at a subway station, anywhere. There's always something interesting to see. I love studying entomology, animal life, marine life. Again, on location, beginning to finish, watercolor. 20 minutes less. This was from a couple days ago. Beautiful country. Warsaw was beautiful. I really liked it a lot. I really liked this separation of architecture. You can still see a lot of the brick and mortar of the buildings that are still there, but then all this very modern skyscrapers and structuring around. Everyone's so well dressed too, the younger kids and people. It's a little bit different in America. So, sorry that cut off right there, but observation, importance in terms of experience, getting out there, absorbing that information, and retaining it as much as possible. Building the visual library, okay? How do we then retain that information? If I'm seeing it, how do I hold on to it? The answer to it is simplicity, okay? So I have keywords I use in my class. Mileage is one of them. Mileage is practice, constant effort, repeat, repeat, repeat. Second is, how do you see it? Through simplicity. Are you able to break it down to its core essence of a shape? This is a pied hornbill. This is what I see, just a bunch of circles and lines. The thing on the left is easy to memorize. The thing on the right is a little bit harder, yeah? There's a lot more information. But if I can retain the information of the thing on the left, not only can then I memorize that shape, I can turn it in space in my head because I understand what those shapes look like, yeah? If I asked you to draw me a pied hornbill from memory and turn it in space, those details are kind of hard. You got to build those slowly with time. But the simpler the shape, the easier to retain that information. Then you just apply it. You have to understand, in everything that we draw and experience, there are archetypes of things. There's an archetype for a human being, our proportions, right? An archetype for a bird, archetype for an insect, a car, a tank. There is an archetype for that stuff. And when you understand that, the smaller details you start to apply, you play with the proportion, it becomes individual to that object. A 3-step process of drawing a classic car. What is the simplest thing you can see? I see just 2 boxes. There are many different ways to approach drawing, okay? This is just one way of seeing it. And there is no right or wrong way. Is there something that helps you understand? Is there something that helps you communicate so that the viewer understands what you are seeing or thinking? 3-step process. Cassowary bird, yeah? The simplest shape I can see. By the way, if anybody has any questions for me to clarify, to repeat, anytime, just say so. Circles in front of. You're talking about over here, the ellipses and stuff? Right here. What that is a circle to help me control detail. Where is the focal point? If I think about a focal point, I think of a camera. As the viewer in the camera, I can control where the details go. I can control the aperture and the f-stop. Everything in the background is unfocused. That one spot is really focused. So what that does for us in drawing and observation, it saves time. Because if I'm on location, and if I have 5 minutes, and I have all this detail, but I can communicate to the viewer, this is just enough information for you to understand what's going on. So it helps me control detail placement. Focal point line. Some of them have it. Some of them can be just applied without the circle. So I'm going to go into a few of the more pages from the book itself. And this gives you, again, more fundamental breakdowns of every type of object. I'm going to show you guys a few samples here. And we start off with things like plants, insect structure. We go into bone structure and animals. Again, everything that we study has an archetype. So we're looking for the keys of those little elements. I have certain methods and analogies that I use to draw. One real quickly that I like using, I actually learned this from one of my favorite Japanese artists currently right now. His name is Katsuya Terada. Terada is one of my favorite draftsmen. I saw him draw live one day in Los Angeles. He visited. And he said this thing about how he just looked at drawing. And for me, it like clicked. Like, that's just the way I see it, too. He sees drawing like writing. Every line is an alphabet. And when you want to form a sentence or a paragraph or a poem, they're a combination of all those alphabets and words, right? So a line can represent that, and one line leads into another, which then creates that poem. That's the analogy he gave me. I love using that one. I have a couple others, too. I'll share with you guys. But here you can kind of see how simple I can break elements of geometrics or to organics and applying it to skull structures or animals. How simple can I see even a zebra head? Yeah. Now, if you see the element right there, I like using this one quite a bit, that balloon and string. It's a really simple, I guess, visual analogy that I like to use because, when I teach a class like this, there's so much information. And especially when you're trying to draw a live animal at the zoo, what happens? They move, right? So you're trying to draw, and you look up, and the animal's gone. It's like, oh, shoot, I got to start over again, You have that feeling all the time. If you're at a cafe, you're drawing people. You draw the person, you look up, he's moved, or he's somewhere else. Again, hard to draw, right? How do you build that speed up? Well, with something like this, I can use a really simple process to establish two important things, the shape and proportion. Proportion is everything, right? So I use a balloon and string approach. The balloon represents the head. The string represents the spine. I can get the gesture and the pose in 2 easy steps and apply a 1, 2, 3 of torso, ribs, and hips. And applies to every animal I want to draw. Whether it's some kind of pig, an Indian rhino, a Komodo dragon, 3 completely different kind of animals, but my process of how I approached it is exactly the same. That creates a lot of confidence because if I looked at an animal that was similar to something like this, but also different, I would know how to approach it. I can problem solve it faster, yeah? I'm always studying. Now, what this process is also supposed to do is create a sense of curiosity, and I used that word before. I'm curious about the things that I draw. I study it, I research it, I read about it, I watch documentaries on it. So I want to understand not just the visual nature, but also how things work. So when I teach the class, it's not just about, oh, this is how you draw this. I explain things. I say, this is the biology of it. This is how they work. And having that information as a designer makes you that much more of an edge compared to somebody else, right? So if you're trying to create something new from the imagination, the more you observe and the more you understand how those things work, gives you an edge compared to somebody else who doesn't have that information. From organics to even mechanical, hard surface. And everything, again, is fundamentals of shape. Blocks of forms, whether curvature or geometric here. And I study every aspect of it. Now, from both mechanical to organic, what you'll notice is I always like to start off with a very simple side view. And I'm sure a lot of you guys do this too, you know, whether you're doing a silhouette for a character or a creature, a weapon design, a lot of you guys will do silhouettes, right? So it helps us understand, again, establishing proportion. How long is this thing? How tall is this thing? Where is the placement of certain details? The more you understand it, the more familiar you become, the faster you get, the more information you retain. Whether we're going to individual vehicles or architectural structures. What is the shape language? How can I add? How can I subtract? How simple can I make it? And then where do I place the details? This is all pen drawing, no undersketch, no pencil, no ballpoint, no marker, straight pen. I mess up all the time, all right? People wonder, it's like, how do you not mess up? I'm messing up constantly. But the idea is that I understand how to take those mistakes and make it an advantage, make it seem intentful. So don't feel like what you're seeing up here is perfection, right? Every detail is right. It's not. I'm always trying to find ways to apply myself to make things better. Because in my head, when I draw stuff, people ask, like, do you visualize and see it in your head exactly? I don't. I have a general idea as to where to go and what the strategy is to break it down. But the end result is not the same as what I see in my head. The idea is that you're trying to make it better. It might be different too, but that's okay. Again, I love studying different kinds of vehicle forms. This is a really interesting process here. When I teach drawing cars and vehicle forms, people or illustration students are very intimidated by vehicles because of perspective, right? So in this page right here, it gives you a really simple breakdown of how I approach it. The first thing I do is a side view, right, top left. And I love this angle of view right here. What I call that is a tip-up view. It's a straight-on view of the box. So you can see the front and the side, but there's no perspective, actually. There's no tapering lines. But I can draw that car in a 3/4 angle shot. You still see the front, you still see the side. So it just gives someone a bit more confidence to approach a vehicle form. And then we play with things like perspective. Pushing human form, using box shapes, right? Unfortunately, the slides I'm showing you right now are not in this book. Actually, I kept this more of as an extra reward for my Kickstarter backers. I haven't really exposed this stuff online yet, so you guys are, I don't mind if you guys are taking photographs and stuff like that, so you don't have to hide it and stuff. You can take photos if you want to. You can literally walk up here and just be like. But again, I love playing with so many different subject matters. People wonder, do you like just drawing one particular thing? I don't. It's the very act of drawing is what I favor. What I draw on the subject doesn't matter because I can break it down. It's all the same to me. A human being, a car, a primate, a reptile, it's all the same. Again, that's where you can kind of see where that immense amount of confidence can come in. I'm sure you guys may have more questions later on when we go to the meetup, but people ask me about stuff like 3D. Do you know 3D? Should you use 3D? Yeah, you should use 3D. Do I know it? A little bit. Do I want to get into it? Absolutely. I think ZBrush is a fantastic program. I have it. I'm still trying to play with it more because I want to use it as a part of my process to visualize, right? So I don't want to use ZBrush to create models to go into whatever product. I want to use it in a step to understand visualizing different angles of views. That's it. And it could be a very clunky model, but I can draw from it. I can understand how that looks from this angle and that angle. information of notes. So not only am I drawing, you guys should also get into the habit of writing as much as you can. I'm always writing down information. And when you're on location, it's not about what you see. Again, we talked about the experience. What do you smell? What are the people you ran into? You know, what did you buy? What did you eat? All that stuff is important to write down. And as you're drawing on location, you might have an idea. It's like, oh, that would be great for this. Instead of trying to memorize that, write it down in your book so that way you can continue to move forward. So as you can notice, all the information I'm putting up there, part of the dynamic sketching class, is all about that confidence boost, really getting in there and trying to, again, have that eye razor sharp. Let me show you another quick video. It's funny because that part of my dust video that I showed you guys is old. This is 2010, 7 years ago, yeah? But from that video, I still get work, which is interesting. Let me try to see if I can play the video here. This one actually I did this year. Okay, this was for Sony in San Diego. I'm not going to show you the entire thing, but just to show you, even the stuff that I do in chalk, it's applied to the industry. This was for the introduction video for the Major League Baseball video game. It was a really weird project. So all the chalk stuff, they're like, oh, can you draw chalk for us for the video game? It's like, all right. So you never know where your skill sets will be applied. You know, you might think, well, I'm going to be a designer, and that's all I'm going to do, and work in, you know, visualizing details. But I was asked to do chalk illustrations for an introduction to a video game. Never thought I would do that. So it's kind of funny what comes your way.
And here comes Robinson, trying to steal home. He's safe, says the ump.
It was a fun project, 3-day shoot. They had me draw right on the spot. I don't know how many of you guys follow American baseball. I actually don't follow American baseball either.
Little roller up along first. Behind the bag. It gets through Buckner. Here comes Knight, and the Mets win it.
And let it be said that number 8, Cal Ripken Jr., has reached the unreachable star.
So these are like major moments in history of baseball in the sport.
The luckiest man on the face of the earth.
All right, we'll stop it there. But that was a really bizarre project because they're asking me to be part of a brand that's majors, you know, sports. And it's like, how would people who play the game know who I am, right? It's like my face is up there, so I guess now I'm connected with Major League Baseball in some way. In any case, so as we continue forward talking about how it all applies to the industry, this next couple slides I want to show you guys is stuff that I've just worked on. You know, you've seen a lot of the fundamentals build up to, you know, observation, building a visual memory and stuff, but you know, then where does it go? Where does it go to the industry? This was one of the last studios that I was at. As you can notice at the bottom, it says Sci-Fi and Tryon was the last studio in Downton, San Diego, California. And I was more of a generalist. I was a concept artist, and I was essentially like the fireman. And anything that needed immediate attention and design, they gave it to me. It's like, okay, you just have a day for this, or a couple hours for that. And I worked in everything, from props to weapons to characters to aliens. On this particular game, which is a massive MMO, it was okay, but it was fun to work on. I was actually in charge of developing the alien races and, you know, establishing the shape language and all that stuff. What was interesting about this game also is that as all of us as concept designers, we had to then be able to problem solve the fact that this game was going to be made into a TV show. So all of our alien designs had to be people in prosthetics and makeup. So we couldn't go crazy with the aliens. We had to understand it was like Star Trek, essentially, yeah? But it was a fun project. I got to be able to use my drawing skill sets majority-wise. You know, people ask me about things like photo bashing and textual information, and I think it's great. Use it whatever way you want to be able to complete the project to the level that it's required, to the client or to whatever industry you're in, and get it done, right, in a timely manner. I love to draw, and I love to just paint, so that's what I focused on. Establishing a couple of the aliens and stuff like that. So again, I was jumping around all over the place to really help build the style guide for this world. Crazy mutant monsters and stuff like that. So as you can notice, you know, this is definitely essentially concept, design, things that you guys would typically see. This day and age, I actually haven't touched concept design for like games in a while. I've ventured off into many other things. Again, I've worked in fashion. I've done eyewear design. I used to travel to Paris and Italy twice a year and work with a studio out there, go to the expos and design eyewear. Currently these days, I'm doing a lot of illustration work. I have a couple gallery shows coming up, a couple solo shows in California, working on a lot of my own personal projects, doing a lot of comics. So it's kind of interesting how things go in many different directions. A little bit of process right there. I still love the big brands, you know, things like Street Fighter and Capcom, and things I grew up with. All of you guys, I'm sure you know really well. This was one they were sharing on the Promised Land page. Again, it's a really simple line drawing. This is actual photo textures on there, so I use a lot of that stuff too. Little overlay, bit of color. And people do ask me, it's like, do you only work analog? Do you do digital? Absolutely. And it's all dependent upon the client. What do they need? What's required? How much time do I have? And from there, I make the choices and decisions. Currently, these days, I'm really heavily focused on using a lot of brush pen, developing a style to actually get into a comic. So I'm developing one at the moment for this particular character. And he started off, and here's the interesting thing about drawing and how ideas can germinate. And I'm sure a lot of you guys will sit there and think about, you know, if I want to develop a portfolio, it's like I got to create new ideas and stories and stuff. And they're really hard to start. Like, where do I even just begin? And to be quite honest, I don't have a direct answer for you guys. For me, a lot of the times it just happens just by the act of drawing. And stuff just pops up out of nowhere. This particular character, I call him the blacksmith, came out of nowhere. I was essentially practicing brush pen for perspective. That's all it was. And then in one drawing, this character popped up. I had no idea who he was. I didn't know his backstory. I liked it. It's like, okay, I can kind of see where this can go, and I added a little story to it. And I built it and built it and built it and showed it on social media, and people loved it. And from there, it germinated into an IP, a storyline. So I'm hoping at the end of the year, I have a full comic with him. And I'm actually working with a Chinese manufacturer to actually produce statues and toys also. So it's crazy how a simple sketch can just all of a sudden turn into this big project that you work on. So you can try to control it and really look for that one idea. Other times, it just kind of happens naturally, and you have to be aware to be able to jump on that opportunity if you think it's a good idea. So it's the constant effort of drawing where you produce a lot of content, which gives you a higher chance percentage to be able to then visualize something that could be interesting. And so for me, when I develop IPs through sketching, that's where it kind of starts. All this drawing what you're seeing right now is the Pentel brush pen. I don't use any underlay. Everything is straight in. Pieces like this take me about an hour. All dry brushing. If some of you guys are interested in dry brushing techniques, I would be more than happy to show you. It took me 6 months to master the brush pen, to figure out how to do this dry brush. I had no idea what I was doing with the brush pen at the time. And again, through 6 months of training, I was able to find small little nuances. When I draw, it's not even about the skill set in drawing. I understand completely about the tool. I actually break things down, and I understand internal components and parts. I actually break it apart, and I put it back together. These were some recent pieces I did for the San Diego Comic-Con that happened this year. I'm at 2 shows every year at San Diego Comic-Con, and there's another one in Burbank, California, which is called CTN, which is how Promised Land found me. They asked me to come over here, and I'll be promoting these guys at the end of this year. One last video real quickly here, and I'll show you guys this one. This one can be a little bit fun. That was for a gallery show a couple years ago, and they asked me to come out there to do a live drawing on a mural piece. And when it comes to pieces like this, let me give you information as to how I think. I actually have no idea what I'm going to do until the very moment, actually. I'll think about it a couple times here and there in terms of like the content or just the theme and subject matter, but when I go up there, I just knock it out. I like this feeling. Now, some of you guys might be like, how do you work that way? There's so much pressure. What if you fail? I like that. I like going up there with the potentialness of actually messing it up horribly in front of people. There's something about that feeling, that adrenaline, that I guess some people like. I kind of like it also. At first, I was a very different person. We'll continue with the more slides, but back when I was in art center as a student, I was actually a very internal introvert individual. I hated talking to people. I hated big groups. And so you guys see me up here, you might think, well, how are you doing it now? It all came through, again, from my mentor, Norm, and instruction. But I had to just commit and actually make that change to be able to be someone to expose myself, just put myself out there and try, whether through succeed or fail. This is some actually real current work. This is a solo show that's going to be happening in September in Burbank. This is a series of illustrations I've been doing it kind of just happened out of nowhere again. Again, this was a theme that came up where me and a friend were sitting on a cafe, we're drawing, and say, what should we draw? And I said, I love fish. And she was like, I love forests, so let's draw fish in forests. So we drew one sketch. I was like, oh, that's kind of cool. And then I just kept building it. I just kept drawing it. And all of a sudden, a story came up, a character developed, and I have a whole bunch of series of his path and where he goes. And it's like a 25-piece show, large watercolor pieces and three-dimensional pieces too. And I did it because it was fun. It makes no sense, but hey, enjoyed it. Yeah. A lot of this was inspired by things like role-playing games, like Final Fantasy, whatnot, where characters, put on quests by these really weird fish and stuff. And he, has these weird, crazy moments. A lot of fun. So I'm kind of ending with this slide here. We got about 15 minutes. We'll see if we have a moment from a demo, but maybe we might not be able to. I don't know. This is me in 2002. Yeah, I was 22 years old at the time. At this point in my life, again, I was a very introverted individual. I hated talking in front of crowds. Norm over there, he was helping me. This is actually at an elementary school for kids. We were just sharing information about the process of how we draw and how they should draw. In 2010, Norm was killed. He was actually murdered. He was shot. And Art Center came to me and said, will you continue what he was trying to do? So, in this situation, that's where I was forced to commit. It fell on my lap. It's like, okay, what do? I can't just not do it, right? He was someone that inspired me. He wasn't about technique either. This individual, this guy, the word mentor, again, I talked to a lot of people about this earlier. I feel like that word mentorship is used too loosely. And, I understand that you guys want to, ask questions, you want mentorship, you want help and direction, but it doesn't really happen that way. It can't happen by just asking somebody. It has to happen through just a real synergy of understanding who you are individually as a human being. So Norm taught me, yes, a lot about technique, but he taught me so much more about how to be a human being. And from there, I continued producing, and trying to carry on the legacy that he laid down. So this dynamic sketching, the foundation was something he started with, and there was no way I could just let it die. There was nobody else they could ask. And I've been, with him by his side day in, day out. I knew his kids really well, his wife, and to this day, I've known his kids since they were 3 and 4. They're in college now, so I've seen them grow, and I've, trying to give them a bit of direction as well too. And Art Center was a place that was my home. And I hope that you guys will be able to kind of find that for yourself, because you have to understand, this is about community. This is about people. And I know that all of you guys are like here to think about, how do I grow? Because currently right now, my only critique what's going on is that this industry has become very selfish. As students also, about me. How do I get better? What do I got to do to get to the next step? But back when we were training as students, it wasn't just about me. It was about the person next to me also. We were working in groups. We're constantly sharing ideas. We're pushing things back and forth. So, I hope that you guys will also be able to then build that sense of community, which Promised Land is all about. Yeah, it's all about bringing people together from multiple different countries to share ideas and say, this is where I'm at. What are you doing? How am I going to be able to get to that next level? So I hope that you guys will be able to have that similar mindset as well too, because it was events like this that were outside my control, and that's really the thing that I don't take for granted. Is that whether through meeting a person like Norm, and ever since I was in high school, there was always someone there as an instructor that I connected to. And they were mentors that were not even necessarily artists. One of my mentors in high school was a language teacher, Japanese teacher. I didn't learn a lick of Japanese, but she was a great life coach. She taught me so much about who she was as a person. So again, as I stated in the beginning, there was no way I could fail because of the people that I met. Unfortunately, not everybody has that same opportunity. You don't always meet that right person. There are two things in this industry that are outside your control: timing and luck, right? Meeting the right person at the right moment in time. Where are you? Sometimes it just passes you. Sometimes you're not even aware of it. So I hope you guys have some good luck and some good timing to be able to meet the right people. Let me leave you with one more real quick analogy in terms of how I was compared to him, compared to who I am now. The way I drew when I was in my 20s was about perfection. Every line, every shape, every detail had to be perfect. And if it didn't come out the way I expected it to, I beat myself up, right? Angry. I got frustrated. I did it again. Now, that sense of drive was great because I got better. But that level of stress, again, can burn you out. It was very hard to keep up that same level of energy. I don't think that way anymore. The way I create and the way I draw is not about a fight. That's the way I approached it. That whiteboard, a piece of paper, was an enemy to me, and I had to fight it to make it work. Now, it's not like that at all. It's a dance. I understand the steps. I can then break those steps. I can then be creative with it. Whatever the result is, I'm having fun with it too. So the end result with whatever you create will always be amazing. Thank you, guys. So I do have two books that I brought with me today, and we are going to raffle it out. We're going to do it at the Meet the Artist section. So what's probably going to happen is I'll have a couple people help me out, and you guys can submit your names maybe somewhere, and I'm going to just draw it out of, I don't know, something, a bowl or something like that, and I'll be giving these two copies out. I also not only just have these two copies, but I do have, I have to count, but I have a bunch of small mini books, which I will also raffle out too, all right? At the Meet the Artist section, I have a lot of original sketchbooks. These books will be available for you to look at, and while we are there, will be a good opportunity for me to even just draw, answer more questions, because I'm sure some of you guys may have questions now. But I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you guys for joining me. It was a lot of fun. I appreciate that. Thank you.